So, what does it really take to become a qualified homeopathic practitioner? A lot of us probably have some ideas, maybe some assumptions, but today we're going to skip all that and go straight to the source. We've got our hands on an official syllabus for a professional homeopathic exam, and we're going to break down what's actually required. Yep, that's the big question we're diving into today. We are about to peel back the curtain and see exactly what's on the test. And I'll give you a hint. The answer is probably not what you're thinking. Not at all. Okay, first things first, let's just talk about the sheer scale of this thing. The written exam alone, it's worth a total of 800 marks. Just seeing that number tells you right away, we are looking at something incredibly comprehensive, something really demanding. Yeah, this is no weekend workshop. This is a serious academic deal. All right, so let's start with the basics. Like a lot of professional exams, this one kicks off with some foundational papers. These aren't really specific to homeopathy itself. They're more about testing general professional skills. So for starters, you've got to have a really strong command of English. That makes sense for clear communication. But then you get to the general studies paper, and wow, it is surprisingly broad. We're not just talking current events here. It actually covers things like local history, in this case, the history of Mizoram, and even gets into the role of technology in medical science. So it's really about setting a baseline for good communication and just general worldly awareness. Okay, so with those general papers out of the way, the syllabus really starts to build. And honestly, this is where things take a turn that might just completely challenge what you thought you knew about homeopathic training. Believe it or not, before we even get to the core homeopathic subjects, the syllabus lists a whole bunch of papers covering what you and I would call, well, conventional medical science. And this is a really crucial point. And get this, the detail here is pretty fascinating. A full 300 marks are dedicated just to these subjects. We're talking about things like antenatal care and gynecology, or the initial treatment for emergencies like burns under surgery. It even covers national health programs in community medicine. I mean, that sounds exactly like a standard public health curriculum, right? So if you thought seeing surgery and internal medicine on the list was a surprise, just wait. The syllabus includes an entire section that is, I think, the most unexpected part of this whole thing. It deals with that tricky intersection of medicine and the law. Yeah, you are reading that right. Forensic medicine and toxicology. I'm talking about candidates being tested on identifying bodies, understanding post-mortem changes, and even the nitty-gritty specifics of violent deaths like hanging and strangulation. It's a stark, clinical, medical legal component, and that is a world away from the gentle, natural image that most of us probably have of homeopathy. All right, so after laying this pretty significant foundation in conventional medical science, the exam finally pivots. It moves into the subjects that really define homeopathy itself. The philosophical and practical heart of the whole practice. And right at the very heart of that philosophy is something called the organon of medicine. The easiest way to think of it is as the main textbook, the foundational text, written by homeopathy's founder, Samuel Hahnemann. This book lays out the entire logical framework, everything from the concept of health and disease all the way to how you actually apply the remedies. Now, from that framework, you get a really key diagnostic idea: the totality of symptoms. The principle here is that a practitioner doesn't just focus on one single complaint. Instead, they're trained to look at the whole person, physically, mentally, emotionally, the whole shebang, to figure out the right remedy. And then you've got the theory of miasms. Okay, this one's a bit more complex, and it's pretty unique to homeopathy. But to put it simply, it's the idea that people have these underlying predispositions, often inherited, to chronic diseases. And these can affect their health their whole life. So if we look at how the marks are broken down for this core paper, you can really see what's most important. You've got philosophy, you've got repertory, which is basically a giant index of symptoms, and pharmacy. They're all key. But look at that, the biggest single chunk, worth 100 marks, half the paper, is something called homeopathic materia medica. So what in the world is that? Well, the materia medica is basically the homeopathic version of the pharmacopoeia. Think of it as the encyclopedia of every single remedy a practitioner has at their disposal. It's their toolkit. And like we just saw, knowing this toolkit inside and out is the single most important part of their specific training. And the scope we're talking about here is just vast. The syllabus demands that you know over 100 different remedies. And we're not talking about synthetic drugs here. These are all derived from a huge range of natural sources. Let's look at a few examples just to make this a little more concrete. Okay, so for example, they need to know all about the properties of allium cepa, which, believe it or not, comes from the common red onion.
But it's not just plants. Nope. They also have to study remedies like Apis mellifera, which is derived from the honeybee,
And of course, more familiar things like chamomilla, which comes from the chamomile plant. So you start to get a sense of the sheer variety of natural substances they have to know like the back of their hand. All right, let's pull all of this together for a second. What we've seen are two really distinct sides to this training, right? On one hand, you have this solid grounding in conventional medical science. And on the other, sitting right alongside it, is this super deep, specialized knowledge of homeopathic philosophy and practice. And that really is the core takeaway here. This curriculum isn't something that's totally isolated from modern science. It's actually a blend of two very different worlds of knowledge. You've got forensic toxicology on one side and the organon of medicine on the other. It's quite a mix. And all of this leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This kind of hybrid syllabus means that practitioners have to be fluent in two different languages. Really, the language of conventional medical terminology and a completely different therapeutic philosophy. So it raises a pretty fascinating question, doesn't it? What could different medical systems, both mainstream and alternative, learn from looking at each other's training? It's definitely something to think about.